Hello friends, Kishan is here again and welcome you in this video tutorial. In previous video tutorial we have learned how to design an entity class in Hibernate 5, right? And this is the entity class we had written from the scratch. And we had also written a client program and we were trying to persist employee information into the database, and we turn up with some exception, something like this, right? So as I said, I'll show you in next video tutorial how to fix it, right? So we are getting some kind of exception saying that common uh, acceptance exception, something like this, right? So reason is that when you look into the Hibernate 4 and 5, so there are a lot of changes happened in the Hibernate 5, right? So here one thing you will have to change over here. So here we are using MySQL dialect. So instead of using MySQL dialect, here basically I'm using MySQL 5. So that's the reason you need to specify the dialect class, which is basically will adhere with the version itself, MySQL 5. And once you specify this dialect class, something like this, then here you can see HBM2DDL auto I have given the create. So Hibernate is gonna create first of all, Hibernate will drop this table if this table exists in our schema that is called test schema. Then Hibernate is gonna drop this table and recreate it because HBM2DDL value we have given as a create, right? So and those created DDL query we can see on the console. That's what we have given as so SQL true, and those SQL query we can see in the formatted fashion. So that's what this flag we have made true, right? So now this is our configuration class. We have a utility class Hibernate util, which is basically responsible to create a session factory, and this is our factory method, which will basically returns the session factory which gets created in this static block, right? And here is our client program. In client program we have a private method which basically returns an instance of employee, and we begin the transaction because we are going to make some change on the database side, right? So whenever you want to make some change on the database side, right, like if you want to create, delete or update some record on the database side, then you require the transactions. But if you want to read some data from the database, then in that case you don't require a transaction, right? So you can suffice with the session in that case. Now here we get the employee instance, we begin the transaction, right? We are trying to save the employee into the database by calling the persist method, and finally we are committing the transaction. So just we are making call to the commit so that permanent change will happen on the database side, right? So after making this change, after making dialect class MySQL 5 dialect, right? Now let's run this application and see how it works. Cool. So here you can see the console. Hibernate has triggered this SQL query saying that drop table if exists employee underscore table. So if this table exists, then this will get dropped because HBM2 DDL value we have given as a create. Now table is getting created based on the specified metadata, based on the specified annotation which we have given in the entity class. So table name we have given as employee underscore table. Employee ID, that is an integer, that is not null and auto increment. So this column is basically a primary key, right? A primary key is always not null, and we have used generated value strategy as identity. So that's what Hibernate has applied auto increment on this column, right? Now DOJ, that is date of joining. So here I think I have changed later point of time. Here we want the column name as date of joining, not DOJ. So let's say make it date of joining, and let's run this project again. So now column would be date of joining, not DOJ. Okay, so again this table has been dropped, and you can see the DDL query. Now table is created with the specified metadata, in the entity class. So this is a primary key which has been declared. Auto increment has been applied because generated value we have given identity, and not null because primary key is always not null. Now you can see the column name of the user, date of joining, and that is taken as a timestamp, date, time both by default. Now email worker, and default size we haven't specified, so default size is taken as a 255 characters. Now employee name, that is worker, and size is 100, which we had specified, and we had supplied the attribute null label equal to false. That's what Hibernate has applied, not null constraint on it. Now salary is double decision. Now this DTL has been fired and table is created on the database. Now Hibernate has triggered one alter query on this table because we had applied unique constraint on the email, right? If you look into the entity class, then we had applied unique constraint on email, right? So email column would be unique, right? So you cannot insert two employees with the same email address, right? So email column will be always unique. Now once DTL is completed, then Hibernate has triggered insert query, right? And this insert query looks like a prepare statement, right? And this placeholder will be substituted whatever value you are supplying over here in the employee, right? So if I go to the database, in test database, and if I refresh, and you can see employee underscore table is created, and you can see the data has been inserted, right? So that's all about the how we can persist employee information into the database, right? So we have a persist method. So and another method we have something is called save, right? We have a two method. One is save and persist. These two methods belongs to the session interface. So if I run this program, then you will get the almost similar output. But what's the difference between these two API, right? You can see in the console. So table has been dropped, table is created, now table is altered for unique constraint, and finally employee record is inserted into the database, and we get the same output. So what's the difference? Difference between these two API, when you call your save method, then you can see return type of save is serializable. Means this is gonna return you the primary key, generated primary key. And what's the data type of your primary key? That is the integer. So you can typecast into integer, right? So I would say id equal to, and you can typecast integer, right? So how you can typecast serializable into integer? Because integer extends number, and number basically number implements serializable interface, and that's the reason we can typecast into the integer, right? And here you can see, you can display a message, employee is created with ID, right? So record will be inserted into database, and generated primary key will be returned by this API, right? And you can see here you can see saying that employee is created with ID 1, right? What about the persist? When you look into the persist, then persist method does not return any value. So if you look into the persist method return type, it's a void. That's the major difference between these two. There are some more differences which we will discuss in the future video tutorial regarding cascade and all, right? So but here in this video you will have to understand one key points. If you want the generated return primary key to be returned, then you will have to use save. If you don't want the generated primary key to be returned, then you can go for the persist, right? One more things you will have to keep in mind when we talk about the persist and save. This method is used to save an entity or object into database and return a generated identifier. It will throw an exception if an entity already exists in database with the same identifier. When we talk about the persist, this method is used to save an entity or object into database and return a void. It will throw an exception if an entity already exists in the database with the supplied primary key. So here we have a primary key is auto generated, but in sometimes if your primary key is already existing, if you are setting primary key yourself, and if you try to persist or save uh, uh, entity object with the same primary key which is already exists in the database, then these two API is going to throw an exception, right? So that's all I wanted to discuss in this video tutorial, guys. So in next video tutorial we'll discuss about the one more method is called save or update, right? So thanks for watching this video, and this code you will get on the GitHub, and GitHub location I'm gonna specify in the video description itself. So that's all. Thanks for watching, and see you in next video tutorial.